Hey guys, it's Corey here with ShatterPause.com. I'm joined by Rashad Miller. Hey Rashad.
Hey, how's it going, Corey?
Dude, I am awesome. There's a new set out, Khans of Tarkir. I know we're a little bit late to the jump with our set review here, but I wanted to make sure we got someone who knows a thing or two about a new set to come on and give me some really insightful stuff.
It's never too late.
Exactly, it's never too late. So we're gonna start with the Abzan guys, and boom, right off the bat, we got Anna Fen's the Foremost. It costs a white, a black, and a green, and it's a 4/4. So 4/4 for 3, that's already ridiculous. Whenever she attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on another target tapped creature you control, and if a creature card will be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So what do you think about this card? Obviously limited, it's amazing. But what do you think about it for like a constructed format?
For constructed, you're looking for a little bit better, than a 4/4 for 3 mana and constructed, because you could get, you could get a 4/4 for 2 mana sometimes, depending on the situation. Its ability can come up, but obviously that mana cost for constructed is going to be a little bit weird. There is the whole, well, I'm thinking standard, obviously. So,
yes, standard. So getting one of each color on turn 3 in standard is going to be a little bit iffy, especially because we don't have the shocks to pair with our fetch lands.
Right.
So that might detract from this card, but I think it's a fair card to play. I'm not sure it's going to be like a big standard player, just because the abilities are both sort of limited oriented. But obviously, once you play this creature, it'll have an impact on the board that's positive for you.
Oh, definitely. Unless it's the only creature you have. But there is, I could see something like this in Modern where you have access to Birds of Paradise and like Noble Hierarchs and such, where you can play this on turn 2, and when you attack with it on turn 3, you get to put a counter on maybe a Birds that's tapped for mana for some reason, or, maybe some other aggressive creature you play on that following time.
Sure, yeah, turn your mana dorks into threats. That seems like a pretty good play.
Yeah, there's better ways to do that in Modern, but, that's just a thought.
Yep. So there's a cycle of enchantments called Ascendancies. The Abzan one is, of course, Abzan colors. And then when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. And whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So you can already see kind of the Abzan connection between the previous card and this card with the +1/+1 counters, and that comes into play a lot in this set. As far as playability in constructed, how do you feel about this card?
Well, when I was just mentioning better ways of putting counters on your creatures, well, this is one of them. If standard gets to the point where you have a bunch of either a token strategy that's viable, or a strategy that you have a bunch of mana creatures like Sylvan Caryatids or something like that, this is a nice way to glorious anthem your team, and also give you a little bit of resilience, because when those 1/1s and 2/2 dorks would die, at least you get a 1/1 spirit out of it for your troubles. And flying is a great ability, so I could see having one of these in play, and then maybe a Supreme Verdict-esque card happens, and you have a few spirits left over, and then you get to play another one right after it and put counters right on top of it, and now you got a bunch of 2/2 flyers.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a good anthem plus resiliency. The only downside is, I guess, is that it's not giving your creatures you play next that same bonus. It's just giving them that 1/1 spirit thing. So we'll see how that one shakes out. Dune Blast is one that I've seen people talking a lot about. It's of course 7 mana cost, 4 in the Abzan colors. Choose up to 1 creature and destroy the rest. Now, to me, that has Commander written all over it.
Yeah, this definitely is going to be a commander staple for all those commanders that have the Abzan wedge in their commander's color. 7 mana is a lot for most other formats. I don't even see 7 being that doable in standard. Obviously, this is a limited bomb if you have it. The games actually go pretty long. You can get up to 7 mana pretty easily. And to be able to point at your bomb or your humongous ground dork and say this guy stays and everybody else goes, that's a pretty powerful effect.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty sweet limited bomb. I'm not sure it's going to be like the first pickable rare type of card, but it very well might be. You're going to be able to get those colors by the time you're at 7 mana for sure.
Yeah, it's obviously a commitment to pick a 3-color card as your first pick, but just look at what you get out of that. If you are those colors and you cast that spell, you're way ahead.
Absolutely. How about Ivory Tusk Fortress? This is our 5 mana 5/7. Untap each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it during each other player's untap step. So it's sort of like Vigilance for your creatures every turn once they have a +1/+1 counter on them.
Well, this is definitely a limited bomb-minded card because it works well with Outlast, where usually with the Outlast creature, you have to choose whether you're going to attack with it or give it a counter, before you're, on your turn, because you can't Outlast as an instant. You have to do it only as a sorcery.
Yep.
So this gives you the ability to use your Outlast creatures on your turn, and then they untap, and then they get to play defense on your opponent's turn.
Absolutely. And if you're playing a lot of mana dorks, you'd of course basically untaps land on their turn as well. So from what we've seen, there seems to be a lot of ways to enable sort of mana dorky strategies in these colors, maybe in the next standard. So how about Siege Rhino though?
Siege Rhino, what does it do?
Siege Rhino is a 4 mana 4/5 with trample, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. Now, I've got a lot to say about this card, but I'm gonna let you kind of wrap up. Like, this is gonna see play in standard, right?
I think it will see play in standard. Obviously, there's a color commitment to this card, but in any deck that can make these colors of mana, it's kind of like a Thragtusk-esque replacement. It can help you get back into games that you're losing. The 3 life that your opponent loses isn't too bad either. And you're getting 5 toughness, 4 power for 4 mana. That's about where you expect it to be. So I like it.
I like this card a lot too, and I want to kind of focus on how this card interacts with other black cards in standard. So in the new standard, you'll still have your Thoughtseize, you'll still have your Sign in Blood, all of your black draw spells are going to cost you life. And Thoughtseize, we know, is going to be a major player in the next standard. This card is a way to both replenish your life from Thoughtseizing your opponent and also punish people who are intending to use their life as a resource. Freezing things like Thoughtseize or Sign in Blood or things like that. It's kind of like that double-edged sword, but in a good way for you and for them. It punishes them for playing the same cards that you want to play.
Yeah, for the same amount of mana, this would be, any drain life effect would cost the same amount. Obviously, a drain life effect usually can target creatures, but in this case, you just get, a 4/5 Trampler for your troubles.
Yeah, and I think
pretty damn good.
That's just fine. So how about the Abzan charm? So of course there's a charm for every one of the wedges. This one just costs 3, and you get to choose one of 3 excellently bullet-pointed options. You get to exile a target creature with power 3 or greater. You get to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, or distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures.
I actually like what they did with the charms in this cycle. Each one of them has a destroy a creature. Like, they all have a removal mode, and then they all have kind of this mode that you can use if they're the board's at parity and you don't have a good target to destroy, or you just need to get back. And then they have a make my guy better mode. So they're all going to do similar things, and I think they're all going to be playable and constructed. It's just going to come down to which colors you're able to make. If you are if you're an Abzan deck, you're going to play the Abzan charm because, look at what it does. You can either kill a creature, kill a threatening creature, or you can draw 2 cards, which, at instant speed, and all these charms are instant. So these removals and draw spells and combat tricks are all able to be used on your opponent's turn.
Absolutely. And being sort of an instant speed read the bones divination kind of thing is pretty ridiculous in standard. We haven't seen instant speed draw that's this powerful since, I think Twice, and that was played as a 4 of in most decks where it was good. So I think this is pretty good. Notably, it doesn't hit Courser of Kruphix as a removal spell, but just about every other creature that matters, it does kill. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Armament Core. It's a 5 mana 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, distribute 2+1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. So it's just the third mode of the charm.
Yeah, it's the third mode of the charm, but it's also a 4/4, creature for 5 mana, which on average is fine. This is obviously a limited-minded card. It's used because the the Abzan wedge has a lot of cards that matter that one of your creatures has a counter on it, and they are sort of the Abzan lords of such. Like there'll be a creature that says if any of your creatures that have a +1/+1 counter on it gain lifelink. So this is another way to put counters on multiple creatures without spending multiple turns and getting a 4/4 out of the deal.
Absolutely, and yeah, like you said, it's going to be a pretty big bomby card. Like this feels almost like a rare and limited, but it is just uncommon, so you might even get 2 of them. So that's pretty sweet. The Chief of Scale is part of kind of like a mini, I want to say, cycle within this one wedge. I mean, you've got the Chief of the Scale and the Chief of the Edge, I believe, and they both do similar things. This one is a 2/3 for 2 that gives other warrior creatures you control +0/+1. And warrior is kind of a sub-theme within the set. You'll see a lot of cards that matter if you have warriors. So I think this is if you're in the warrior-themed deck, this is pretty sweet. And even if you're not, it's a 2/3 for 2, right? So
yeah, warrior, being a warrior does matter for mostly black-white. It feels more Mardu than it does Abzan, but obviously black and white are the 2 colors that are in common to both of those wedges. There are most of the warriors are black and white. There's a couple of red ones. I don't even know if there are any green ones that aren't red, white and black, but that's a theme that's going to come up. And when you're playing limited, you should be checking out that creature type, because that warrior part is tacked onto a lot of cards that you wouldn't realize in the beginning. Yeah, it's definitely, you're going to see a lot of creatures that are going to be getting benefit from this +1 defense.
absolutely. So what about Abzan Guide? This is just your standard common morph creature. This one just happens to be Abzan colors. This is your 4/4 for 6 with lifelink, which is, a pretty good card if you're not playing another maybe rare bomb in 6 mana kind of thing. It's yeah, basically you just play it face down for 3 and put it face up for 5. I mean, is this good enough to be maybe a pseudo combat trick?
Well, this is mostly, I mean, these are kind of your nuts and bolts morphs for the set. I mean, this is common in Abzan colors, so if you're Abzan, you're probably going to be playing it. The way that Morph was designed for this set, for all of the listeners who are familiar with Morph from Onslaught Block, Morph back then was more of a guessing game, and it was kind of a coin flip within combat. Like on turn 4, when your opponent's attacking with a Morph, you were forced to guess, am I supposed to block it or am I supposed to let it through? That's a big change for Morph in this set, where R&D decided that they didn't want that guessing game to exist, at least not so early in the development of the game. So a lot of the morphs, basically any morph that would turn face up and beat another morph in combat, that morph cost is going to cost 5 or more. So this is the Abzan version of that card. This is where once the game gets to your opponent having 5 mana and they're attacking with a morph, these are the cards you need to start worrying about. You don't know, I mean, if they're hard, like if they're a solid Abzan, so you know that for 5 mana, probably the best thing they can do is going to be their on color common morph, aside from any rares or uncommons that they would have. And 4/4 and lifelink it's a good deal when you spend 5 mana tempo-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a warrior, so it does hang out with your Chief of the Scale as well. So it would be a 4/5 at that point.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. I told everyone to start looking out for the creature type, and I didn't even look.
Absolutely. So here's a pretty cool rare from the set, Herald of Anafenza. It's 1/2 for 1 white, just white, and it's got an Outlast for 2 into white. but whenever you activate the Outlast ability, you put a 1/1 white warrior creature token on the battlefield. So here you see that again. This guy's a human creature, but he does produce more warriors. So if you get this guy, pack one, pick one, you might just want to hang out with your Chief of the Scale.
Well, this guy's a bomb, actually. It's I'm not going to say it's constructed playable yet because Outlast for 3 is a little much, but usually with the Outlast creature, you have to decide whether or not you want to use it on defense right now, or if you want to Outlast it a few times, put a couple of counters on it, and then make it more formidable in combat. Whereas this guy, as soon as you get 3 mana, you use the Outlast, you're getting a 1/1 warrior for your troubles alongside making this guy a 2/3 then a 3/4. So you don't have to decide on whether or not you need to block in the beginning because you get a chump blocker right away.
Yep.
And I can see this guy getting out of hand easily because 3 mana to produce a 1/1 is still a good rate.
It is. It's 3 mana, but you get 2 power and 2 toughness out of the deal, which is pretty sweet. I think the main thing people are going to have to worry about is deciding when to flip the switch of creating more dudes and just straight up attacking with your 4/5.
Right. That's a common thing for Outlast in general. That it's actually a pretty unique kind of decision tree you have to go with. Like, how good does this creature need to be in order for me to not have to invest mana and time into it anymore?
Absolutely. So High Sentinels of Erishin is a 3 into white, flying 3/4, and when it gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, and for 4 mana you can put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature, or just a target creature. So you can put it on the Sentinels as well if you want.
Yeah, but usually you don't want to do that because it's going to get the bonus whether or not you put it on it. So you want to put it on the other creatures, make them bigger, which also makes the High Sentinels bigger. Unfortunately, not a warrior. It's a soldier, so darn. But this is another awesome rare bomb for your Abzan deck when you are looking to put counters on creatures to activate your Abzan lords, quote-unquote, and without losing the tempo of having to tap an Outlast card and losing it in combat.
Absolutely, and this is obviously pretty safe to play in any white deck. It almost looks like it's splashable even if you're not in those colors, just because of the ease of the mana and everything. And it does share a creature type with Stormcrow, which automatically makes it way better.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to play this in every white wedge. Any wedge that can cast this is going to play it because 3/4 flying for 4, superb rate, and the ability to use your extra mana to pump it and other creatures. It's a bomb.
It's huge. So the Abzan Battle Priest is kind of your cookie cutter Outlast Lord. So it's a 3/2 for 4 mana, but it's got Outlast for just white, which is pretty sweet. And then each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has lifelink. So on the first activation of this, you've got a 4/3 lifelinker.
Yeah, it's and just a 3/2 for 4 isn't a horrible rate for a card. 3 power is, I mean, it's going to trade up effectively. The 2 toughness means it trades with any morph, which could be an issue. But remember, this guy doesn't care who has the counter on it or if that creature's an Outlast creature. So if you already have a 2/2 or 3/3 that has a counter on it, you have a morph with a counter on it from some spell, you play this guy and that guy just instantly has lifelink and you can swing a game in your favor pretty quickly. Having Outlast for just 1, that's obviously the sweet spot because you want that to be as least impactful on the things you want to do with your mana, but you definitely want to get this guy turned on because that 2 toughness is not enough to compete with, the cookie cutter morphs in the format, and you really want to get him up to 3 toughness before he even considers getting in the red zone. This guy may never get in the red zone. He may just sit back, play defense for a while, and make sure that you can win the race because all your other creatures have lifelink.
Absolutely, and it's good that you mentioned that kind of the sweet spot for toughness in this set is 3 or greater, just because of the number of morph creatures that are going to be on the battlefield at any given time. So it'll be a judgment call whether or not they want to trade something like a morphed creature that may be stronger to destroy your tempo with Battle Priest, but I think having 3 toughness is going to be a major thing in this set. The Abzan Falconer is sort of like the same creature, but instead it's got its power and toughness flipped, and it gives your creatures flying instead. So I think a lot of the same things you said about the Battle Priests kind of apply to the Falconer as well.
Yeah, and this guy's 1 mana less, so that's a thing. Just a 2/3 for 3 is actually perfect because you're spending the same amount of mana that someone did to play a face down creature, and this guy's just going to beat it in combat. And you know you're not going to just lose straight out to any morph before 5 mana. If so, you can block just about any morph and pretty safely. There's a couple that can turn face up and have 3 power. I know there's at least one that can turn face up and have 3 power, but it also has 1 toughness, so it'll at least be a trade.
Yeah.
But you're not going to just lose straight outright to any morph with this creature. So it does a good job of defending your life total against those. But you're probably going to use the Outlast ability at least once. So it's it depends on obviously the situation of any game, but this guy has options.
Yes, I think it seems very strong. The Dazzling Ramparts. It's a 5-mana creature, 4 and a white. It's got Defender, and it has an ability that is 1 and a white, tap this, tap target creature. So the way I'm reading it is it's basically block anything on the ground. If you need to, tap something that's in the air for defending yourself, and then in a crucial point in the game when you're like alpha striking or something, you can get the most important blocker out of the way sort of guy.
Yeah, the way that Magic is nowadays, 5 mana for a quote-unquote removal spell is about where things are, especially if you're quote-unquote unconditionally dealing with that creature. Now, obviously, you're spending 2 mana a turn, and the first turn you have to wait. But usually tappers have pretty fragile bodies, so on the turn that you play Dazzling Rampart, you can actually block something really big the turn that you played it. So it's like a tapper that can tap something on the turn that it comes down, which is actually pretty unique. So that I think that alone is going to make the 5 mana cost for casting it not sting so much. And then once it is active, I think you're actually just going to use it as a tapper. I don't know that you ever want to really risk some type of combat trick or anything weird that can throw a monkey wrench in your plan because you decided that you wanted to block with your 07 instead of using it as a tapper.
Yeah, and this dude will hold down the fort, or I guess in this case be the fort, while you get your Outlast creatures kind of big enough to get through their defenses. Okay, so let's talk about Watcher of the Roost. It's a 2/1 flyer for 2 and a white, and it's part of the cycle where you morph it face up by revealing a card of the same color in your hand. So you reveal a white card in your hand, and then it gets turned up and you gain 2 life. I think this is probably one of the best ones of these cycle.
Yeah, and this actually showcases another interesting thing that R&D did with Morph for this set. Morph now is more of it's kind of like a mana fixing mechanic as well, because there are a lot of we're in a 3-color set because we're dealing with these wedges. So if in any point you're missing 1 or 2 of your colors, you can at least be proactive with your mana by playing morphs. That was showcased in some of the commons that are of more 3-color commons that cost 6 with 1 of each color. At least if you don't have all those colors, then you can make 3 colors mana. You can play the morph. Now this is another way that this also fixes your mana. Whereas if you are playing white but you don't have any planes, you're able to morph this card, and chances are that if you're playing white and you don't have any planes, you have another white card in your hand, so you can then reveal the other white card that you can't cast yet. You give up a little bit of information, but that's not a big deal. And then you get the 2/1 flyer that you could have just played for 3, straight up right, but you didn't have the mana for.
Oh man, how often have you been staring at a handful of cards that have the 1 color that you're missing? This is actually a very clever design now that you've explained it to me.
Yeah, and it also has some applications if there are some type of limited decks that thrive around some type of 5-color morph mechanic where you'd be able to morph this up also, because obviously if you're playing all 5 colors, which, some people will be able to do. There's a lot of chances that you're not going to have all of the land you need on turn three, or at least all the colors that you need on turn three, and you're able to reveal like a wedge card that has three colors in it, as long as one of them's white, to have a 2/1 flyer for your troubles. You get a couple of life also, so it's this may be a card that's always better face down, even if you have the mana, just to get 2 life for giving up maybe some information that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's going to be a really good player in Limited. The Ainok Bondkin is a 2/1 for 1 and a white. It's got Outlast for 1 and a white, and every creature you have with a +1/+1 counter on it has first strike. So this one seems a little bit weaker. I mean, you can see it by it being a common instead of an uncommon, like its kind of brethren. It is cool that it's a hound, though.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's my dog. So funny. All right, I'm sorry I said
that was.
But there's another thing about morph sets that you need to keep in mind. Tempo wise, if you're able to trade your 2-drop for their 3-drop, where with your 2-drop being, you know, a 2-power creature and their 3-drop being a morph, you're going to be ahead tempo wise. Obviously, it's still a 1-for-1, but cards like this and cards even in Onslaught back in the day, like Glory Seeker, which were just vanilla, basically you're a grizzly bear. Those enable you to stay in the game tempo wise, even when you're like, if you're on a draw and your opponent doesn't play anything and you're able to play a 2-power creature for 2 mana, now you're able to attack into their morph, and in this set the morph is gonna die if it blocks, because that's the way that all of the morphs were made. Now that's disregarding the actual abilities that this guy has, which gives it, you know, it can grow once per turn, and given all your other creatures first strike, can really put a stop sign out for your opponent on the ground or in the air if you have a couple of creatures up there that have counters on it as well.
Absolutely. So to me, just looking at the cards so far in the set, this seems like Haymaker magic to me. Like you're building up your forces until you've got this big Haymaker, and then you kind of swing and kind of hope for the best.
The format is kind of slow. There are a lot of big mana spells, but there is an aggro deck that keeps everyone in check. So like any good format, that no matter how fast or how slow it is, there needs to be something that's putting a clock on you that you have to respect and at least plan for while you're building your slow deck. And that's Mardu, obviously.
Perfect. The Salt Road Patrol is just our vanilla Outlast. This is our cookie cutter Outlast dude. He's a 2/5 for 4, has Outlast, isn't even a warrior, so I'm not really sure what to say about this guy.
It's fine. It's gonna round out your deck for 4 mana for 2 power and 5 toughness. It's not horrible. Obviously, it's not going to be a premium card in your limited pool, but being able to come down on 4, if you're on the play and safely block a morph it's kind of a big deal. Even if you're on a draw and they get their 5th mana and they attack, this thing can survive a lot of the 5 mana costs turn face up cards. There's only a few of them that actually have 5 power, so this guy will hold the ground even without using that Outlast ability. And if the ground is already shored up, anything with Outlast has the potential of being a threat on the ground.
Absolutely, and I think the designer of this card was pretty self-aware when they made the flavor text saying soldiers win battles, meaning your bombs and your removal, but supplies win wars. So your 23rd playable needs to be at least this good to win the war. Our War Behemoth is our vanilla white morph. He's 3/6 for 6, but you can morph him for 5. So this is a really cool concept for a beast. But beyond that, I mean, it's just our vanilla morph guy.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see a lot of things like this in the set. You may even see a couple of things like this in your sealed decks and in your draft decks, because as long as a card has morph, it's going to be at least quasi-playable. Obviously, it depends on what you're getting out of the deal once you turn it face up. 3/6, not very exciting. It's going to survive in morph battles probably. I think there's one card that actually has 6 power that can get flipped up that actually kill this. So if you both have mana and they attack with their morph and you block with this morph, they turn their morph face up. It's probably like a 4 or 5. You turn yours face up. You got a 3/6. They bounced. I mean, obviously that's not too exciting, but if you're playing this in your deck, it's not the worst thing in the world.
No, you're gonna find a use for it for sure. So let's move into some of the green cards in this house. Hardened Scales. It's just green, and it's an enchantment. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put up on it instead. So beyond my mush mouthiness, what it means is basically if you're going to put counters on something, go ahead and put one more on it instead.
Yeah, cards like this are interesting because they obviously want you to be doing a lot of one thing, which in this case, it looks like in limited, it wants you to have a lot of Outlast in your deck. Obviously, putting 2 counters on a creature instead of 1 is going to be a pretty big deal. But this is a card that doesn't really do much on its own, so it would be pretty scary to have this in your deck because it's a horrible top deck. It really only does something if you get it out early and you get other cards that kind of support it. But if you do get it going, you're probably going to get far ahead because 2 counters instead of 1 on one of your cheap costed Outlast creatures could grow out of hand way before your opponent gets the mana that's necessary to remove a big threat like that.
Absolutely. This is a card that might tip the scales in your favor. Oh, yes.
It's going to be one of those nights, huh?
Absolutely. But it's definitely not like your pack one, pick one playable, but if you're already in Abzan by the second pack, this seems like a pretty decent card to take.
Yeah, I'd try to wheel it. I don't know that I'd even pick it up before it tabled once.
Fair enough. So we've got our basically green equivalent of the white creature we saw before, and Tuskguard Captain. It's a 2/3 for 3. It's got Outlast for just green, and each creature you control with a counter on it has Trample. So, but this one's a warrior. Yes, this one's a warrior. So the warriors are going to come out to play with this card.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously isn't the type of warrior you're really looking for in your warrior decks because the warrior deck tends to be pretty aggro, and I mean, this guy doesn't have the aggro stats. It does have the stats of I can block a morph on turn 3 and turn 4, and it also has the stat of becoming a 3/4, which is a pretty good body on the next turn. Trample's a pretty big deal, probably one of the more powerful abilities in Magic in general. Obviously, this is going to work well in any Abzan deck that you have, the Outlast already going. There's a lot of big, beefy things in green. You may pick up some of the more Teamer-esque cards that go along with some of your Abzan builds, and if you can put a counter on those things and make them tramplers, they're pretty scary.
Yeah, it's very cool card. Archer's Parapet is one that I've seen people play a lot in the pre-release when I was there, and it's totally my kind of card. This like 0/5 defender wall for 2 mana that just kind of blocks everything and then slowly eats away at your opponent's life. But it is off color, so it's green to cast it, but black for the ability. Is this a card that you would play in your Abzan deck, or is this something that's kind of more for something else?
Well, I think it's a pretty good card to play in Abzan. It's pretty good to play also in Sultai, which has both of these colors, because both of those decks kind of want to slow the game down, and this does do that. It can safely block all of the morphs, even up to turn 5. There aren't that many that can kill it after combat. I mean, after turning face up during combat. The ability to make someone lose 1 life, it's a threat. It's a clock. 20 turns later, all of your opponents are dead because it says each opponent.
Yeah. So if you're doing a 2-headed giant sealed or something, this is twice as good.
Yeah, it actually is. That's something to consider because I mean, two-headed giant seal is actually a lot of fun, and it's to me it's fun to look for cards that are just strictly better in two-headed giant, and this is one of them. I mean, it's not like a bomb in two-headed giant, but you know, it it blocks something that would otherwise deal damage to you, and it gives you something to do with your mana at the end of your opponent's turn.
Absolutely. The Kin Tree Warden is a pretty interesting one. It's the 1/1 for 1, so it's the stats aren't super good, but it's got for 2 colorless you can regenerate it and you morph it for 1 green mana. So this is sort of your like infinite blocker guy.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It is also a warrior, so I actually see it more in some type of aggro Abzan deck that you could probably put together. Um, it morphs, which means that it's not the worst card in the set. I mean, this is a card that I can see myself playing face down and just throwing it in front of the first thing I can see, just, you know, hoping that my opponent will use some spell to, you know, to kill my secret 1/1. I don't know that I would actually flip this guy up for a green and then pay 2 to regenerate it just to have a 1/1 after it's all done. Uh, it's I could see some situations where for some reason I need to block something forever and use 2 mana to do that, but there's better ways of blocking things in this format, especially if you're in green. You're probably already got some outlast. You have some creatures that you can get, you know, a big toughness on, which also have a large power. Um, and you know, they're walls. This is like a wall that I have to pay for every turn.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is a morph, so I could see it being in one of my decks just as a you know, a gray ogre. Maybe there'd be a situation that it's in battle with something with 1 toughness, and then I would take that opportunity to, you know, to keep my card. But just in general, I would stay away from this card and limit it.
Yeah, I think this card is mostly a trap. If someone finds a corner case where this won them a game or something, I would love to hear about it.
I don't think that's ever going to happen.
There's a lot of people on the internet. You never know. Somebody might do it.
Yeah, there is. Someone would try very, very hard.
It's a long shot. Long shot squad. 3 in a green. It's got Outlast for 1 in a green, and each creature you control with a 1 counter on it has reach. And it's a 3/3 by itself, so it's a gray ogre by itself. Oh, no, that's not a gray ogre. It's like
Hill
a
giant.
hill giant by itself, and it can gain reach and give others reach. I think that's a pretty sweet thing for a green deck to have.
Yeah, I actually like this card a lot. Having reach in green is something that you want to be able to do because aside from actually, you know, destroying a flying creature, you're probably not going to have flyers yourself. So if you want your big fatty boom booms to be able to block things in the air, you're going to want this guy. You're going to want this guy. You're going to want some other ways to put counters on your other bigger creatures. And if talking about, you know, gumming up the ground, this guy is the one who's leading the charge in that gown grumming expedition. He's a 3/3. The first time you use him, he changes it to a 4/4. That's probably the only time you really need to outlast him. 4/4 is a pretty big body, especially most of the flyers are going to be a lot smaller than him. And not to mention any other creatures that are already in play that have counters on them. They're going to have reach.
As a common, I think this is going to be a very crucial key card for against the blue and white decks that have a lot of flying.
Yeah, I want at least one of these in every one of my seal decks or draft decks that I'm green. When I see them, I played him a couple of times, and he hasn't let me down. I like him a lot.
Cool. So we're heading into the black cards of the Abzan now. The Retribution of the Ancients. It's just black and an enchantment, and for 1 black mana you can remove X counters from among creatures you control, and target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. So of course this is supposed to be comboing with the Outlast mechanic, and it feels like it could almost be like in an EDH deck as well as like a repeatable removal type spell.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this card, first of all, is very needy. I mean, you need to have creatures, and those creatures need to have counters on them, and then you need to remove those counters from your creatures. So, in theory, you're not you're not really gaining, you're not getting anywhere. I mean, obviously you get to pick which creature you give -X to, but you're making your creature smaller to permanently to make their creature smaller temporarily, and obviously you would only do that if you would kill their creature, but just from a value standpoint, it's asking a lot for you to have, and then you may be able to kill a creature out of the deal. Um, I mean, if you have creatures with enough +1/+1 counters on them that you can use this as an effective removal spell, you probably don't need to do that. You probably just need to attack with your creatures with all the +1/+1 counters on it.
Exactly, and what this card does do best is make combat math really difficult for your opponent. So if you're attacking with one or two creatures that have +1/+1 counters, then you can kind of reassign which of their creatures is stronger in combat. So you get to keep the one you want, and they get to lose the one that you want. So I think that's where this card shines the most. As a straight up removal spell, it does. You're right. It demands a lot of you. The Mer-Elk Nightblade is your 2/3 for 4, and it gives all of your other creatures Death Touch with Outlast.
Yeah, another one of the Outlast lords, and Death Touch is not a bad ability. It allows you to trade up in in a lot of situations. So this is another defensive card. Death Touch doesn't seem to be a very offensive ability, so it does fit well in Ops and Outlast decks.
Absolutely. It's going to buy you the time you need to make your guys way bigger. So we have a Disowned Ancestor, which is your 0/4 Outlast guy, and it costs 2 to Outlast him. So he is, because he only costs 1, I mean, he's a really good solution to super aggressive decks. But if I can go back and find that white, basically equivalent, that just, I think, costs 2 for 7 toughness, that's just way better, I think. Like the white version. Oh, no, it costs 5. So maybe this is the card you want for against super aggressive decks.
This is, I mean, I am actually very impressed with this card. Let me tell you why. One, it's a warrior. So it's a 1-drop warrior for your black-white warriors deck. It's going to get any warrior bonuses from any other warrior bonus cards that you have. 2, it's a 0/4 for 1 black mana. It's going to be able to block morphs for the first 3 turns of, well, the first 4 turns of the game. Thirdly, that Outlast ability isn't very expensive. So the first time you use it, you get a 1/5. Second time you use it, you get a 2/6. It's going to win battles with just about any morph creature, barring them spending 5 mana to keep it alive. The one other tricky thing this thing can do, which we haven't touched on yet because we haven't seen any cards with this ability, but the Mardu clan's ability is called Raid, and that's an ability that checks whether or not you've attacked with a creature. This guy doesn't have Defender, so you can play him on turn 1, attack with him on turn 2. It's probably going to survive that attack, even though it won't be dealing any damage, but you're going to then enable any of your raid cards that you have to play on turn 2. So this, I mean, it looks a little innocuous, but I think this is like a key card to enabling a lot of things in a lot of the decks that have black in their wedges.
Okay, this is kind of a sleeper card when it comes to commons. Like, once you count all the ways that this guy can add up to be helpful in your deck, I think you've sold me on Disowned Ancestor for sure.
Yeah, I could see people looking at this. The first time they look at it, they're gonna see a 0/4, which isn't something that you would normally play. It feels like a wall, even though it isn't a wall. Someone's going to attack with it on turn 2 and enable one of their raid cards, and against and then that player's going to be like, oh wow, that was cool, and then they're going to play against someone who activates it a couple of times on turn 2 and turn 3, and then they end up getting stonewalled by a 2/6 and eventually getting attacked by like a 3/7 or something. Those aren't minuscule stats. Those are pretty good stats for a card that you didn't invest that much mana in.
That's true, and as any Canadian knows, it's nice to have a 2/6, which is a unit of measurement for alcohol.
Oh, I understand now.
Yes, it's a Canadian-only joke. Um, this is a bit of a weird one. This Krumar Bonkin, the 5/3 for 5, which is actually a pretty good stats, and it's got morph for 5 as well. So it's one of those unique morph cards that have the same ish mana investment as just straight out playing it.
Yeah, a lot of times you get a little bit of a discount. If you play it face down, you can usually turn it face up for one fewer mana, one less mana. But this one, you have to make the decision, and it seems like you would only play this face down if you didn't have any other plays that you could make on turn 3. I would be fine with playing this guy face up on turn 5, 5 power, 3 toughness. It's a pretty decent rate. It trades with any morph that your opponent could flip up on turn 5. If for some reason you have some ferocity cards in your deck, this turns them on. It has over 4 power. It's kind of just meh. It's another filler card. It doesn't really do enough in your deck where like it doesn't have any synergies, it doesn't really have any abilities. It's kind of just, I have 5 power, I have 3 toughness, and I'll get in the red zone if you want me to. Also has morph. But you're gonna need a really either you're scraping for playables, or you really need it to turn on ferocious or something in order for this guy. I mean, it is also a warrior, so maybe you're just wanting to just overload on the amount of warriors in your deck. And there are a couple of cards that reward you for doing that. So that's probably the only reasons you would play this card.
Yep, I think if you're worried about ferocious or having warriors, this is a fine guy, or a fine 23rd kind of playable in your black deck. The Unyielding Krumar is a 3/3 for 4, and it gains first strike until end of turn. I saw a ton of people playing this in my pre-release, and it does really gum up the board if you've got both colors.
Yeah, I mean, a 3/3 for 4 that's a good rate. It's bigger than a morph. It came out a turn after the morph, and the threat of activating first to give it first strike is actually enough to at least say that this guy's going to get in 3 damage. Also, it blocks pretty well. 3 attack, or 3 points of power of first strike power is pretty good. So it's going to stop your opponent from wanting to attack into it as long as you have 2 mana up. It's also a warrior, so there's some synergies there. It's a solid card.
Oh man, look at this. I was just looking at this art. Imagine this dude with a Santa hat and a giant sack full of toys. Like, that's an altar that needs to happen.
I have imagined it, and I think I like it. Is he still going to be in this desertous land, or do we get to make it some type of magical Christmas land?
I think magical Christmas land is appropriate. We should definitely do that. I got to make that happen at some point. So let's we've got basically the banner and the citadel left. Let's talk about banners just a little bit. I mean, obviously they're pretty close to what the clue stones were doing in Dragon's Maze. I think they are a little bit better though.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mix between the clue stones and the whatever the I guess they were obelisks and shards of Valar.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, they're at this real interesting point because they cost 3 mana, and on turn 3 you should have an abundance of things that you can do. Most of the cards have morph, even the cards that you'd rather not morph. So you're making a decision of whether you want to add actual threat to the board or develop your board state, or if you want to ramp up to your 4th or 5th manas. I think it depends on it depends a lot on your deck, because getting from 3 to 5 isn't that big of a deal a lot of the times, but there are some morphs that not only cost 5 to turn face up, but also just 5 mana. Like, that 5/3 probably isn't the best example of this, but there's a 5/5 for 5 that if you could play that guy on turn 4, you're gonna win a lot of combats for a while. It actually has a relevant ability while it's face up. That in mind, your deck needs to be able to take advantage of being at 5 mana instead of going from 3 to 4. Now, if you're playing this as just a mana fixer, which, there are going to be some decks that are going to need to do that in a 3-color set, you it's not that good because you're giving up a lot of tempo. The good thing about that is that once you actually have all of your colors, you can cash this guy in for a card. So you're able to at least get the card back for your troubles when you're sitting in it with 7 or 8 mana sources in play. You can at least get a card out of this. And if you draw it late, you can spend 6 mana to draw a card, which not a good rate, but it's something to do with that card. So
exactly, it'll dig through your deck. And I think cards like this are mostly rewarded when you're playing those decks that are going for a very long game. And I kind of noticed in the art here that they were giving that hint that you should be playing cards like Archer's Parapet. I think it looked pretty similar to me. So, and there was another card that had this exact same tower in it. So, I think you'll want to do the long game if you're playing cards like this.
Yeah, and I think if you are playing this card, you need to have had something out on turn 2 to at least keep up with the morph that your opponent's going to play on their turn 3. There are a lot of 2-power cards that can fit that build, but I'd see a curve like turn 2, 2/2 guy or whatever, and then turn 3 this, you're still in the game and actually you're a little bit ahead because your 2-drop fights well against their morph for the time being, and then once you get to your 5th mana, you're just playing face up 5/5s or 4/5s instead of having to, play it face down and then use 5 mana to flip it face up and not add another card to the board.
Totally. So with the 3-color lands, of course, the end of the battlefield tapped, so you're giving up some of your tempo for the color fixing. You obviously play this if you're in a deck with all 3 colors, but I think you're pretty safe to play this even if you're just playing 2 of the colors.
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 cycles of land. There are the tricolors, and then there are the dual colors that are all of the dual color combinations. When we get to the dual color, I don't know if there's one coming up next, but they gain your life similar to the refuges in Zendikar, I think it was. So the only thing you're giving up by only having 2 of the 3 colors of a tri-land is that 1 life, which, obviously that doesn't matter that much. So in this 3-color set, if you have a tri-land that has at least 2 of your colors, you should be playing it.
Okay, yeah, and actually I don't have that land pulled up, but there is, of course, a cycle of dual color lands that there's 10 of them, there's 1 for each color combination, and then they skin you a life, enter tapped, like you just said. So that wraps up our Abzan. I think Anafenza would be proud of our analysis of her guild. I think it's a very strong set of colors.
She looks proud.
She does look very proud. Okay, so I guess we'll see everybody in the next set, what I think is Jeskai.
All right.